Hello, my friends. Welcome. My name is Joe. This is the Joe Martino Show. And today we're going to talk about clinical labels, how they get overused in society, and why that's detrimental to the people that use them. Not the people they're talking about, but to the actual user. Saw a really interesting meme picture a few weeks ago, which kind of kicked this thought off in my head. And we're going to talk about it today. Let's kick it off. This is the Joe Martino Show. Hello, my friends. Welcome. I hope your day is going well, wherever your day is. I hope that you are enjoying the day. If I sound a little frazzled, it's probably because I am. This morning has been quite the setup, trying to get my microphone to work. The adapter that I have to use because of the microphone that I have wasn't working, so I had to kind of rig that to work, which means I had to kill my power source to my computer because the new adapter doesn't fit over it. And then my remote wouldn't work, and I've not been sleeping well because of my surgery, which I don't want to ever sound like I'm whining about that, but I do kind of want to tell people like, hey, this has been my journey. I feel like that word's overused, which is appropriate because today we're going to talk about an overused word. But this has been part of the process of me healing, and there's good days and there's bad days and there's rough nights and then there's rougher nights and then there's the occasionally good night. I actually slept really well last night. But the accumulation of not being able to sleep, I think, can catch up with you. And so that's part of it. I don't regret having the surgery. I've had a few people reach out and I've said, hey, do you regret having the surgery? No, not at all. I knew recovery was going to be a part of it. My wife and I have talked about this. I do tend to be a bit optimistic on how much or how difficult the recovery is going to be. And so I was over optimistic on this. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see that I haven't shaved in a couple days. A weird side effect of this surgery, or a weird something happening after the surgery, is I have to shave more often than I used to. I used to be able to get away with about 3 days of not shaving, and I'd be okay. Now, basically, in 2 days, I have to shave. And I know some of you guys, you shave in the morning, you have to shave at night. And if you don't shave, you get this wonderful beard. Like, congratulations to you. I want you to know I'm not being a smart aleck. I think that's awesome for you. My wife doesn't like beards, so that would be completely unhelpful for me. And I'm glad that I don't have that, and I'm not sure what I think about this new turn of events. What I want to talk to you about today, though, is not my beard, nor my recovery, nor how difficult it has been or it has felt to set up for this podcast today. I want to talk to you about an interesting picture that I ran across a few weeks ago that I don't completely buy into, but there is enough there that I think we need to consider what they talk about, actually on both sides. So I want to talk to you today about the word narcissism and how often it gets used to dismiss people, and then how often real narcissists will dismiss actual pain. Okay, so a few weeks ago, and to be honest with you, I don't remember when, I came across this picture, I think on Instagram, maybe Threads, and it says this: 35% of women say they dated a psychopath, 42% say they dated a sociopath. Which, by the way, despite common arguments against this, there is no clinical difference between a sociopath and a psychopath. They're the same thing, literally the same diagnosis. 55% say they dated a narcissist. But statistically, only 1.5% of men are psychopaths, only 4% are sociopaths, and only 6% are narcissists. So either women are the unluckiest creatures alive, or they keep mistaking a man with boundaries, standards, and self-respect for a villain. Sometimes he wasn't toxic, he just didn't tolerate nonsense. And there is a lot of truth to that last sentence. I understand it's very dismissive, and some of you are ready to go get your pitchforks and your torches and come to my house. Don't, because that wouldn't go well for any of us. And I don't necessarily agree with the tone that this guy wants to take. The research, I couldn't find his research where it says 35% of women say they dated a psychopath. I did find one, though, that said 30%. So, I mean, that's pretty close. 42% say they dated a sociopath. I didn't find that one. Again, I found one just in the low 30s. Is 1.5, 4%, and 6% is pretty close. The diagnoses percentage-wise is under 10%. It's a very small number. It is much lower than most people would want us to think, or most people want to think, because there is a benefit to being able to say, well, I dated a sociopath, I was married to a sociopath, etc. So I went and looked it up. I went, as a therapist, we do have some resources available to us. And I went and looked it up. And I do want to make the whole point of today is to make an understanding that there is a difference between sociopath or psychopath clinically and how we're using it socially. And at some level, I'm okay with that. I have a dear friend, his name's Will Clegg. He's an older gentleman, he's retired, and he makes fun of my short books for serious change. He commented on one of my Facebook posts, oh, is it under 5 feet tall? Sorry, I couldn't keep my hands from typing. Will, if only we could remember that language evolves. And I get it, language evolves. These words are gonna come into our society, but I wanna talk about true numbers for a minute, all right? And first of all, there is no, oh, you're a sociopath, psychopath in the DSM. It is antisocial personality disorder. And yes, I am one of the therapists that believes the DSM-5 is an absolute mess. I have very little hope that the DSM-6 is gonna be any better. I think that we are destroying our field with some of these things that we're doing. But nonetheless, if we're going to use terms, we have to have some common level of agreement. And so here's the thing. Antisocial personality disorder in the general population is about 1 to 4%. Some research, so stricter research, would actually suggest that it's 1%. Narcissism, let's talk about this in general population. Again, huge distinction between narcissistic traits and narcissistic personality disorder. I've covered that once before. We're going to do it again just because I hear this so much. I see it so much in social media. Most people can be arrogant. I want to be clear on something. Most people can be arrogant, self-absorbed, entitled, defensive, attention-seeking, or immature at times. That does not equal a disorder. If your job is a people-facing job, you probably like attention. You find me a pastor of a large church, and I don't care what he or she says, they like attention. They like it when people respond to their antics. That doesn't mean they're narcissistic. It doesn't mean that they're not narcissistic, but we can't just base it off of that, right? A lot of really good salespeople are not narcissistic, but they really like attention. That doesn't make them NPD, narcissistic personality disorder. If you look at the research, roughly 0.5%, this is according to eMedicine, which you can go look up, 0.5% to 6%, depending on the study and population sampled. Many sources say it's 1 to 3%. In a counseling journal that I found that you'd have to pay for, they put it at 4%. But everybody agrees it's under 6%. So here's what we have to wrestle with. I have clients. Their ex is a narcissist. Their kids are a narcissist. Their parents are narcissists. Their coworkers are narcissists. The people at their church are narcissists. Their ex-friends are narcissists. Everybody's a narcissist. That is statistically impossible. It is. It's statistically impossible. And we have to stop using that label because it gives us an off-ramp to be able to deal with hurt. And to some extent, I think this is the same thing that we've done with autism. We've made autism so broad that everybody's autistic. We've lost quirky. We no longer have quirky. We're no longer allowed to say people are just kind of weird, right? Because that's offensive rather than just an observation. And so we've lost like, oh, that person's quirky. They're not quirky anymore. They're autistic. Which, okay, maybe, but there's got to be space there for us to navigate both. Because when we have this conversation about narcissism or NPD or sociopath, we confuse things like selfishness and immaturity, poor boundaries. How many people have poor boundaries? That doesn't mean that they're diagnosable. They just have poor boundaries. Unresolved trauma. Right now, I'm walking through something with a client where he was volunteering under someone who did something that he thought was against kind of their organization's ethos. He reached out to her. He said, hey, I think this was against our ethos. He talked to her about it. She dismissed him. He went above her, which is part of their organizational ethos. And she immediately was like, well, I don't know if you should be on this team if you can't trust my leadership. It's a volunteer position. I promise you that woman has unresolved trauma. I promise. Guarantee it. Right? Because what happens is when we have unresolved trauma, we start to get where we are absolutely sensitive to everything. Right after I had my knee surgery, so I had the total knee replacement, and right after that, my wife bought me this great, it's awesome, this cooling thing. You wrap it around your leg, and so instead of ice, it's this cold water. You actually put ice in the water, frozen water bottles, and it runs around your leg. But the strap that they gave to put around it, literally my brain starts screaming, danger, danger, danger. Because my brain knows something's wrong with my knee. It doesn't know what. My brain there's got to be a difference between our brain and our mind. My brain can't reason, oh, well, we did that intentionally, so it's okay. The treatment for this was literally to go to PT, and my PT therapist took a towel and she rubbed it over my knee until my brain calmed down. And then without me paying attention, she took the towel and put it back on my knee to see what I would do. We do that with unresolved trauma all the time. If you were truly hurt by someone who is NPD or sociopath or psychopath, you're going to confuse problematic behavior with trauma because you haven't resolved your own trauma yet. And what we've done is we've made the bar for these diagnoses so low that we look at things like, oh, well, he cheated, so he's a narcissist. Oh, she cheated, so she's a psychopath. No, I hate to say this because I'm not condoning cheating, but a lot of cheaters are neither one of those. They're just human and they make mistakes. Oh, he lies, so he's a sociopath. He's a narcissist. Oh man, she lies all the time. And you know what? I have people in my life, I have people that I'm related to, that they just, when they're breathing, they're just lying. That means they're a compulsive liar. It doesn't necessarily mean they're a sociopath. Entitlement, that doesn't mean that they have some diagnosis. It could just mean that they were poorly raised and they've never grown up. And let's talk about the most difficult one. Sometimes people are just jerks. Sometimes people, they're just selfish jerks. And while that's bad, and we need to be able to deal with that, that does not make them a narcissist, nor does it make them a psychopath, nor does it make them anything other than selfish. And we need to make that distinction. Because here's the bottom line. When someone is a sociopath, they're just harmful and irresponsible. Wrong, right? Hopefully. If I've convinced you of anything in the last 10 minutes, you would say, well, wait, not maybe, or maybe not. Excuse me. Imagine if I could speak. There it is, Aim. I think that's the first time I've said that one in a while. I have a friend that gives me a little bit of grief about that one. But here's the thing. They can be. We have to look at it. But here's the problem. The overuse of these labels can actually hurt people. It can hurt the person. Here's the thing we don't think about much. It can not only hurt the person you're accusing it of, but it can also hurt you. Because the overuse of these labels replaces precision of terminology with outrage. It can stop healing because we make every painful relationship into a pathology story instead of a completely honest one. And this is where I lose people. And I know I lose people here because they've told me, I don't agree with you there. Okay, that's fine. But then let's talk about that. Why don't you agree with me there? Because here's what I see when I talk to people who everybody's a sociopath. I can watch it. They'll be healing. They'll be moving on. And then they get caught up in thinking about their ex, their dad, whoever. And in some cases, that person really will be a narcissist. I can think of one client I had. Ex was definitely a narcissist, was diagnosed with it, all the things. And when my client would stop focusing on their own healing and start thinking about the ex, everybody became a narcissist. And invariably what would happen is that client would then spiral out of control into their own trauma, into their own depths. And they would lose control. And I watch this all the time. People get mad and they stop listening because they want to prove that other people are more harmful than them. Other people did bigger wrongs than them. And when I'm like, yeah, that might be true, but you're still responsible for your healing and you need to stop throwing labels around, they just stop listening or they lose their mind, which could be labeled a behavior. And here's what's happened to modern society. We live in a strange time where literally everybody's ex is a narcissist. So I don't know that I actually believe the numbers in that picture, but I do believe that certainly I cannot tell you how many people I have sat in the room with and their ex is a narcissist. I had one client, late 20s, early 30s, dating a guy, break up with him, date him, break up with him, date up with him, break up with him. Finally broke up with him and he was a narcissist. I was like, wait, if he's a narcissist, so are you. You guys are literally the same person. And I know if you've been to therapy, especially if you've been to the therapist that's completely affirming of everything you say, you just lost your mind. So be it. She lost her mind for a hot second. And then she came back and she's like, well, what do you mean? And we had probably a month of the best sessions that I ever had with her because we talked about like, look, not everybody who does bad things, not every selfish person is toxic. They're selfish. And when everything's toxic, then toxic loses its meaning, right? It's kind of like my favorite. I've probably talked about this, I bet you 50 times over the course of the years I've been doing this podcast. The movie The Incredibles, when the young boy is running, Chase is running, and he's speeding and he's going faster. And I'm like, oh, go faster. And then they're like, no, not that fast, slow down. And all the things. Then later he and his mom are talking and she's like, well, honey, everyone's special. And he says some of the most profound words that we should all learn. If everyone's special, no one is. And we can run that out for everything. I've told clients in the past, If everything's a problem, nothing's a problem. If every person is toxic, no one's toxic. If every liar is a psychopath, there is no there is no psychopath, because it can't be everybody, because by definition, everybody is average. Everybody equals average or normal, right? This is a little bit of a side rant, but it's one of my beefs with modern schools, grade inflation. Everybody has A's and B's. Well, then A's and B's are just old school C's. OG, baby. But let's just talk for a few minutes about what happens when we weaponize labels. And that's what we're doing. We're weaponizing labels. The person married to a quiet person, they're just a sociopath. No, they're just quiet. The person married to somebody who always talks to them, well, they're just narcissists. No, they just like to talk. My wife loves to talk at night. I don't. I want to read and go to sleep. She does not like to talk in the morning, which makes no sense to me. I want to talk in the morning. We live in the tension and we figure it out. So why did this happen? Let's talk about 4 things that happened that I think led to this. First of all, therapy language has gone mainstream. Words once used in counseling offices now live on TikTok, right? There's Therapy Jeff. If you don't know who I'm talking about, look him up. Don't follow him because he has some issues. Instagram, podcast, memes. There are so many things, so many labels. Just this morning, my wife was on one of those local groups on Grand Rapids. She's doing some things and she was looking something up. And this woman was talking about her 8-year-old, and she was like, it was all just normal 8-year-old stuff. But sure enough, Facebook therapist got on there. Oh, she's autistic. Shut up. Literally, you don't know what she is. You have an opinion based on Google research and maybe 1 or 2 experiences. Stop that. Please stop that. Because here's the thing. Once therapy language goes mainstream, labels, let's be honest, labels feel powerful, right? The second thing that happens is labels feel powerful. If I can label you something, oh my goodness, I have some level of authority. And then I have control, right? I always joke about how I'm bitter with the woman who wrote Let Them, because that's kind of my thing all the time. Just let them, right? Like you could say, hey, that was what they could have said. Hey, my kid went through those things, and when I took her in to get her checked out, she got a diagnosis of autism. Okay, but especially when we get to this stuff, oh, he's narcissistic. Well, they're narcissistic. Then you can literally stop looking at your own culpability in the relationship once you can throw that label out there. Here's the third thing that happened, and it's kind of like, I thought about this for a little bit. Could be like, that one could have been, labels feel powerful, could have been 2.1, and this one could be 2.2, right? Or 2.A, 2.B. Because labels create certainty. Let's be honest, pain is confusing. When you hurt, you're confused. It takes mental acuity to process your pain. It takes mental acuity, right? It takes mental energy to work through whatever pain you're in. If it's physical pain, you have to work through it. I have learned this again or anew over the last few weeks, last 5 weeks, because I have had less energy to do things that I was just doing on the regular right up to my surgery. But my energy level went down because I am just constantly fighting pain or navigating different aspects of it. And that's okay. But when you're in emotional pain, if I can just slap a label on the person who hurt me, I can get some level of certainty, and certainly for a short time, that feels like it lowers things. And this is perhaps the most enticing aspect of this. Because if I can label you with pain, or with a label, and that's the reason you gave me pain, I can bring some certainty to myself, and I don't have to engage in healing, which is a very difficult, very exhausting process. And then I think one of the other things we have to consider is labels create tribes. If I can make you the villain, I automatically become the victim. And you'll see this, and where I think that meme picture got this one right, I do see it a lot with women. Oh, I was dating a narcissist. Girl, same! And they high five or whatever. And okay, maybe you were. But let's talk about it and decide how you came to that conclusion. Because maybe you weren't. And maybe you were just betrayed, which still is awful and still is very painful. Because when someone betrays you, lies, abandons you, manipulates you, or shuts you down, it hurts. But look, there are sometimes, I know of a situation right now where an adult is not talking to his adult parents. And I actually think it's the right choice. And I also know his adult parents. And the adult parents paint themselves as the victims. Except that they've done everything to make it right, except one thing. They haven't said they're sorry for what they know they did. right? Because when you start to hurt, your pain naturally asks, what happened and why did this happen? Why did they do this to me? How did I not see it coming? Who are they? And a label feels like, well, they're a narcissist. So they did it to you because they're a narcissist. The simpler the answer, the better we can feel about our complex pain. And we love the word complex. We're putting it in front of everything. Well, I have complex PTS. I have complex anxiety. I hate it, by the way. One of these days I'm going to do a show on that. Like, hey, we don't have to label everything complex because it's all complex. Often, though, the truth is less dramatic. They were just selfish. You dated someone who was immature, and immature does immature. They were dishonest because they've never built the muscle of being honest. They lacked courage. I think this is one of the most common things I see with guys. They lack courage, and then when they feel like they've gone beyond whatever the courage is, the courage spot is that they need to be at, right? So it's like they just try to go along. They don't say what needs to be said. They just go along to get along. And then they try to make up for that with intensity, and it almost always goes bad. And the only reason I use the word almost there is because I hate universals. I think right in line with that, right, the lacking of courage, the natural byproduct of lacking courage, and this is in women too, right? We're raising a society that lacks courage because courage says, I'm willing for you to be offended for the right reasons. When it comes to relationships, I'm willing for you to be mad and or offended for the right reasons. Perhaps the byproduct of the lack of courage is that they just handle conflict badly, right? Like they were wounded, they were unhealthy, and they never learned how to handle conflict well. And so what happens is they end up hurting you because they didn't deal with their own hurts. I've said this before, I'll say it again. I don't know who it originates with, but if you don't take the time and do the hard work of healing, you will bleed on people who never hurt you. We could change that a little bit, and I think this would be original with me. You will cause people to bleed who were nowhere involved in your original pain. So what happens when we overuse labels? And I have personally seen all 5 of these. I want you to know I have witnessed all 5 of these. When you overuse a label, any label, but when you especially overuse these labels, there are some things that happen that are detrimental to you, the user of the labels. First of all, it keeps you externally focused. You spend all your energy analyzing them instead of healing you. And here's something I have said multiple times. You will know you are healing when you move from they to me. When your pronouns and your thought processes and your conversations move from what they did to what you're doing, you know you're healing. When you overuse these labels, very rarely do you actually get to that spot because you're able to use the label and talk about them, the narcissist, them, the sociopath, them, the psychopath, them, the insert the label. And you don't have to deal with you. When you overuse these labels, you can trap you in victim identity. Something bad may have happened. Something bad probably did happen. But staying defined by what the other person is can keep you from becoming who you need to be to heal. And I've seen this. I've seen people so focused on other people, their coworkers, their ex, their boss, their parents, that they stopped focusing on who they needed to be. They rarely look at, okay, well, I need to do this. And one of the things that happens is, and one of the ways that you know this is happening is you start to see the repetitive pattern in everybody's a sociopath. Everybody's a narcissist. It just isn't possible. It is statistically impossible. They could be selfish. They could be weird. They could be hurt, all the things. And when that person gets stuck, I have watched clients sit and wrestle for up to a year in therapy because they refuse to take their focus off of them, off of those people over there. And what happened is it created this barrier to their own growth that they just never were able to overcome until they just accepted that person hurt me and I may never know why exactly beyond they hurt me. Or they were selfish and they were selfish enough to hurt me. Or they were a liar. They lied and they were a liar enough to hurt me. We don't need to go to the extreme diagnoses. Number 3, and I've already talked about this one a little bit, but what happens when we overuse this is it weakens real language. If everyone is a narcissist, the word loses its meaning. If everyone is a sociopath, the word loses its meaning. And here's the thing that I'll often ask clients, because what happens is I'll see this a lot in middle-aged women who have been legitimately hurt by someone who is their ex. They will start to see everyone as their ex. And I will say to them, do you want to be defined by what someone else's ex did? Because they'll see it. Guys, I've got to go a different approach. I see it with guys, and I typically ask them, do you want to be defined by your worst moment? But with women, most of my women clients, female clients, when they stop and I say, look, do you want to be defined by like sometimes they'll be dating someone again, right? They were married to, maybe I can think of a handful of clients I had that were truly married to truly awful men. They get divorced, they start dating again, and they'll go through a pattern of dates because it'll all fall apart because anything that the person does that is not good, right? They may do something selfish. They do something unhealthy. It's automatically just like my ex. I'm like, wait, do you want to be defined by his ex? Because if you do, I don't know anyone that says yes to that. Where with men, a lot of times I'll say, hey, do you want to be defined by your worst thing? Like, okay, so she did this thing that looked like your ex. Did you talk to her about it? Did you say, hey, you did that and it hurt? And see where that takes you. Because one of the things that definitely happens is this word now loses its meaning. And then the fourth thing that happens is it damages your judgment, right? Because you start seeing pathology where ordinary human flaws exist. And one of the things that makes relationships beautiful is it's two people coming together to overcome their own human flaws together, which means they have to walk through the flaws. And as you walk through the flaws, that means you're going to do things that the other person is hurt by. They're going to do things that hurt you. And if you can't do that, the fifth effect of this is it blocks growth. Sometimes the lesson isn't they were evil. Sometimes the lesson is I ignored red flags. Right? I think about this a lot. I had a client who was dating a guy. I did not date my client. I had a client who was dating a guy who there was literally more red flags than if you were at a Chinese pride festival in the country of China. Don't write for me that I'm a racist. Their flag color is red. Okay, it's a joke. And she just ignored them. I had a guy client who just tolerated too much tomfoolery. I can't think of a better word for the podcast than that. He just tolerated too much. And as long as he could label her crazy or a narcissist, he didn't have to accept that. You lacked boundaries. Sometimes you just have to look at your relationship like, you know what? In this relationship, I lack boundaries. And that led to me being hurt. It doesn't mean you're responsible for what they did, but it does mean you're responsible for lacking boundaries. And this one I see a lot. I chose potential over reality. You chose potential over reality. You dated someone's potential, not who they were. I had a female client, her ex went to a 2-day men's retreat and came back and blah, 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 blah. I hate this phrase, on fire for Jesus. He was a new man. Maybe he was, but give him time to prove that by his actions. And here's the problem. These are harder to face than a simple label, but these are also way more useful to your growth. These are also way more helpful to you becoming healthy than being able to say, she was a narcissist, he was this. And I want to be clear about something. This is an important clarification. Some people are manipulative. Some people are abusive. Some people repeatedly exploit others, in which case they're abusers. Some people do serious damage. This episode is not about protecting harmful people. It is about protecting truth. Because here's the thing, and we'd like life to be really clean, right? But it just isn't. Someone who is actually an abuser is going to share traits with someone who isn't, because they're both human. And I think that's the hardest part. Someone who is actually a manipulator is going to share traits with someone who isn't. They're going to do some of the same things because they're both human. This episode is about protecting truth because two things can be true at once. Some labels are accurate, and sometimes those same labels are wildly overused. And we have to be able to hold both. Maturity means that you can hold on to both of those at the same time. So here's what I want to say. Some of you your ex really was a narcissist. He really was a sociopath. But that is the minority of you. And the chances that means that there are other people in your life who are those labels, very low. Very, very low. Now, you could have very immature people in your life. You could have all of those things. And here's the thing, what I'm not saying is that those people don't also bring harm. What I am saying is that distinction, you have to be able to make the distinction, if for nothing else, is because that opens the door for healing for both of you. So what do we do instead of saying, hey, well, what diagnosis do they have? Which of course we don't actually say, but we do kind of say. Maybe there are some better questions to ask. What behaviors did I experience? What did I believe about those behaviors? Everything happens on two planes, facts and feelings. What happened? What your brain tells you about what happened. What patterns were repeated? Did I ignore those patterns? What do I need to do now? How do I heal now? And what boundaries matter going forward? What can I learn from this? And how can I better engage people in the future? How can I better engage my relationships and other people? And I'll see this a lot with divorced people who were married to everything on the plane from very selfish to literally a narcissist. They'll start dating again, and what they want to do is they just kind of want to word vomit their whole story. They're on date 1, date 2, and they just want to kind of word vomit everything because they want to skip the uncomfortable part of she might not like me, he might not like me. They want to skip the uncomfortable part of what are they going to do when they find these things out. And so they're like, yeah, well, I was married to a narcissist. No evidence to support that clinically, but okay. And then they just tell their whole story rather than doling it out in relationship closeness appropriate measures. And what we're talking about here is moving from obsession to agency. And agency is your ability to govern your own body. So we move from obsession of I have to know outcomes, because let's be honest, one of the things that is most difficult when we are hurt is we want to know when's the pain going to end and how do I guarantee myself that I'll never feel that pain again. Well, labeling someone with a label can help me slow that pain down. And it can also help me falsely believe that I am going to guarantee myself a lack of pain. And that never works. I hate universal, so I'll say that rarely works. Right? Instead, what I can do is I can say, hey, you know what? Well, they could say, hey, I was married, we're divorced. My ex exhibited a lot of behaviors that were very hurtful to me that I tolerated. You can stop right there, especially if it's a first or second date. Maybe share 1 or 2 illustrations if they ask, and slowly move yourself forward and look for true patterns, look for true vulnerability, look for true growth. Okay, so let's just do one more thing and then we're going to close. How do you know if you're in danger of this? Well, if you start talking, just listen to how you talk. And if everybody you talk about is wronging you, everybody in your life is wronging you, if everybody in your life is a sociopath or multiple circles in your life, right? So when I do this with clients, I'll draw a stick figure, and above their head, I'll draw a circle, and then I'll just basically draw circles like a clock around the stick figure and say, okay, you're the stick figure. Now let's label all the circles. So you have your family that you live with, your family of origin, your coworkers, your friends, and we go all the way around. If all of those circles, or the majority of those circles, or I would even probably say if more than one of those circles, you say there's a narcissist in those, you're probably wrong. Statistically speaking, you're probably wrong. In an earlier episode, I talked about the difference between having narcissistic traits and being a narcissistic personality disorder person, right? But this can go across all of it, sociopath, psychopath, all of it. The chances that you have someone in more than one of those circles, it's just really, really low. So if you're saying that, you're in danger of being one of the people who has lost the focus, and your focus is more out there than in here. I'm not saying that you are, because I don't know you, but I am saying that that is certainly a possibility that you have to consider. And that's where we start. Are you doing that? Then you have to back up and say, what else could explain their behavior? Maybe they're selfish, maybe they're immature, maybe they're hurt, and they haven't healed. And then we have to ask ourselves, what are the implications for me if I was hurt and I haven't healed? Because here's the thing, not every painful person has a disorder. Not every breakup needs a diagnosis. Sometimes you date and you're just like, you know what, we're not a good fit. Sometimes you get married, and in our society, you say, you know what, we're just not a good fit. Not every selfish act is pathology. We've lost selfishness, right? We've talked before about how we've lost sadness. Everybody's depressed. If you were sad this weekend, you're depressed. No, you're not. You're sad. I am old enough to remember. I actually, when my in-home PT person came after the surgery, they have to do a mental health evaluation, which cracks me up because you're a physical therapist. What the frick do you know about mental health? I don't go teach people how to do physical therapy exercises, but whatever. So they give me this GAD-7, and I hate it. I'm a therapist, and I hate it. I want to be open about that. Because it's in the last 2 weeks of you felt sad. Oh, well, then you're depressed. I'm old enough to remember when you had to be sad for a prolonged period of time for us to give you a very heavy diagnosis like you're depressed. And this has bled over to us because as citizens, because sometimes someone hurt you just because they are unhealthy, immature, they're fearful, dishonest, or they're not healed. And we need to call it what it is. But we shouldn't give labels more power than truth. Because healing usually begins when we stop trying to classify them and we start rebuilding ourselves. We start building ourselves to who we need to be moving forward. Okay, I know there's a lot in this episode. I feel like I just said, hey, here's a fire hose. Come get a drink of water, and I just opened it up. So if I did and you feel that, I apologize a little bit. This episode is really important to me, and it's close to my heart because I see so many people who are stuck because they just talk about, well, they're this and they're that. And even people that aren't my clients, and I want to be like, if you could only make a little shift from they hurt me, from that to they hurt me, and now this is what I do to rebuild, you would find health in a world that you just didn't believe existed before this. You would find health in a world that you just didn't believe existed before this. All right, if this helped you, please feel free to share it with your friends. I can't tell you how much that helps me. Thanks so much for listening. We'll catch you next week.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please share with a friend. And hey, give us that rating in your podcast store. Until next time, change possible.